is my privilege to introduce today's Faith Connect speaker. He's a friend of mine. His name is Brian Goeringer. And you might recognize his last name as his wife, Kaylee, is on staff with us in development. But if you were hired after June of last year, you might not have seen her because she's on mat leave. And so Brian actually works really close to us. He is the Director of Development at Parks Foundation Calgary. He gets to work in this amazing historical schoolhouse, right, Brian, on 2nd and 13th. So for those of us here in Calgary, I suggest you bring Brian a latte and ask him for a tour, because it is the coolest little spot ever. And what they do there, he's building thriving communities and public spaces in really creative ways. Well, I learned recently that Brian's favorite sport is rugby. And every time I look at him, I'm like, God has built you to be a rugby player. Absolutely. And I also learned that well, he's an incredible cook. I know that from Kaylee bragging on him. He's father to Ezekiel and to Brody. He has many, many talents. And he's somebody who you think, wow, he must have grown up without any challenges. He's just got made in the shade. But today he's going to share with us about his life story and how God has equipped him for overcoming some pretty tremendous challenges. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be encouraged by hearing from him today. So would you give him a warm welcome to Brian Goeringer?
All right. Yeah. Keep pouring in. I guess I'll stand over here so you guys can hear me. Can everyone over there? I'm pointing at you on the screen, I know, but yeah, there we go. I see you now. Hi, I'm Brian. Nice to meet you all. Some familiar faces for sure. Shirley, thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to speak. I've actually attended Faith Connect on a number of occasions. So both through invites by Shirley and from my wife, Kaylee. And I just want to pause right there and say she's really excited about coming back. And I know that she would have loved to have been here, but we would have had kids running around. It would have been chaotic. They would have wanted to talk to me. So we figured maybe we'll wait until she's back at work and then she can join you guys as well. So I send greetings from Kaylee. Wanted to share a little bit about I guess my story, and my story is an interesting one. I don't particularly think of it as being a difficult story or one that it was, out of the ordinary because I lived it. I'm like, it's just, that was my story. But I know that as I've shared it over the years, it's been something where people are like, what? That's crazy. And then I think about it some more and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that was a little bit nuts. So let me rewind the tape. It's 1977. We all know what was happening in the 70s. It was crazy. And my mom was 15 years old. And she conceived a child, this guy, and went through a very difficult process. Being pregnant at 15 years old, she had emerging options. She could keep the child, she could put the child up for adoption, or she could abort the child. And so at each one of those decision-making factors, she met some really interesting and difficult encounters with people of faith. When she went to the clinic to investigate an abortion, she was greeted by a bunch of people who were very fiercely advocating for my life. I'm grateful, and very fiercely denouncing her thought of terminating a child and called her all sorts of awful things. And then she obviously decided not to have an abortion. I'm very grateful for that. And she went on, she was now on a bus, and she was very, very pregnant with me. I was a big baby, pardon me. And so she was on the bus and ran into another group of people who were of faith that, under their breath, hussy, kids these days. And it was a really difficult situation. Needless to say, when I was born, my mom was 16 years old. We didn't really embrace a faith life. That wasn't really part of our everyday. And at 16 with a child, you can only imagine how that is going. And shortly thereafter, my mom has a second. So 2 kids, 18 years old, still a kid herself. And we went through a lot of transitions. We bounced around a lot of different places. We started in Victoria and ended up in Alberta and kind of bouncing around all over the place. And then social services jumped in and took both my brother and I out of the home and put us into foster care. Now, my grandmother found this out, and she would have none of it. She drove from Burnaby, British Columbia to Lethbridge, Alberta, and literally grabbed us by the scruff of our necks out of that office and said, "There's no way our kids are going into the system." And so we ended up moving to Manitoba, and my brother got very, very sick, and we got split up into 2 different homes. And my brother ended up in Steinbach with my great aunt and great uncle, and I ended up with an aunt who was a spinstress. She's like, "Well, I have time in the room," so I spent time with her, and eventually made my way back to my mom, finding out that I had a little sister. So 3 kids by the age of 21, and needless to say, there's a lot of chaos that happened in that situation. And as my sister and I grew up together, and my brother sort of far apart, he grew up in a fairly stable home with great aunt and great uncle who were devout Catholics. And they loved on him and doted on him, but he grew up very embittered by the fact that he was separated from both his mother and his father. And I'll come back to that in a moment. As my sister and I grew older, there's a lot of animosity and rivalry in the home, but there was also some other things happening that kind of emerged a little bit later. We had a stepfather and a number of child care providers who were both sexually and physically abusive to my sister and I. Those things took its toll, and my mother had gotten remarried to this guy who was not much of he wasn't very kind. He was very physically abusive to me, but he was very sexually abusive to my sister. And when my mom, I was 16 years old, my mom left this gentleman, and my sister ran away due to just the complications and the trauma that was there, and really went into this deep part of depression for myself. It was around that same time that I found out that the guy I thought was my father was not my father. It was someone that my mom had met once. And so I had always thought that my brother's dad and my dad were the same guy. My mom was sitting down watching Oprah. You remember when Oprah was very dramatic? I came home, it was the mid-90s, and I came home from school, and my mom's watching Oprah, and she's sobbing. And I'm like, "Oh, now what are you watching?" And it was Family Secrets Revealed, and she came into my room and shared, "Your dad, I think his name is." And as it turns out, it was, and I was able to track him down years later. But I ended up leaving home. I was very, very embittered, very angry. And again, grew up in a situation where faith was not a reality. There was not much hope to cling to. There was not much solid ground to stand on in our lives. And around the same time that I left home and moved out for good at 16, my sister ran away from home. And so she was 12 years old and ended up living with the 21-year-old man who introduced her to drugs and alcohol, who ultimately led my sister on a very dangerous journey. I ended up moving to Vancouver and living with a family who did have a faith. And that was an enormously pivotal time in my life, as well as a ministry called Young Life. And so both of those played a huge role in helping me understand in very real, tangible ways that there was hope and that there was solid ground to stand on. My sister, on the other hand, ended up moving first to Montreal and then here to Calgary, living on the streets. She had a brief and heinous encounter trying prostitution on her own, and she ended up actually right here at the Mustard Seed. I'll pause there because when I say this ministry and what you guys do is so meaningful to my family and I, it really does have a very personal connection. The Mustard Seed took care of my sister and gave her the ability to literally get back up onto her feet again from being knocked down to some of the, I can't even imagine, I don't even want to claim to know the things that she's experienced as a result. The good thing is, and I can say this with great confidence, is my sister is in a very good place. She has 2 children. The oldest is 17 years old now, which is incredible. He is such a beam of light and musical soul. And her daughter is 11 years old. And she's living back close proximity to my mom and has a great stable situation. My brother, on the other hand, 3 kids with 3 different women, living still engaged in self-medication and a very destructive lifestyle. And all in all, it really causes me to pause and think, what's the difference in our lives? The 3 of us grew up very similarly, feeling rejected from family, moving from place to place, having suffered at the hands of mental, physical, drug and alcohol abuse. We experienced many of the exact same situations, sometimes together and sometimes far apart. But what was different? And I love my grandma, but sometimes she says stuff like, "Why can't you be more like your big brother?" And of course that wins over my brother and my sister, who are like, yeah, goody 2-shoes over there. But really what the difference was, someone offered me hope, and I looked at everything else in my life and I saw how destructive and how heinous it was, and I said, there is no other choice. I have to cling to this thought that there is a God who loves me and that there is hope for tomorrow, and that I won't repeat the same things that I've seen happen generation after generation in my own family. I've had a conversation a number of times with both my brother and my sister where they say, well, it's good, you've got your life together, you had all the opportunities to whatever. And I continue to say, Christ was offered out to me in hope, and I accepted it. I lived the same life you did. We know that. We can accept that. And today, my prayer rests in the verse that I was given I told you I moved in with that Christian family. I was given a note early on when I moved in with them. And on it said at the very top, Philippians 1:6, no reference, just the verse. And I went to the father, his name's Ray. I went to him and I asked him, what does that mean? He goes, it's God's promise for your life, for all of our lives. If we will trust him and abide in him, it says that he who began the good work in you will carry it out to perfection until the day of Christ's return. He will be there for you. He will rescue you. He will complete you, and he is never going to be done with you. And it wasn't like the switch went on. I got into dealing drugs. My best friend and I, we got into a lot of really bad stuff. all at that same time. 16 years old, living free from, parents and home, was actually not the greatest thing for me at the time. But I quickly saw where my life was going to end up if I didn't accept this offer from God. There was a time when I was 17 years old, about a month before my birthday. I was hanging out with the wrong guys. We were driving around in a red van, not like a minivan, but those panel vans that like creepers drive in. I was hitching a ride to go see a girl at Metrotown in Burnaby, and the guy who was driving, his name, I'll say it anyways. I don't know if he's alive or not, but his name was Varge. Varge was 60-something, and we knew that he was a bit of an oddball, but he decided to pull over at a paint store, smash the window, and steal the air compressor that was sitting in the window. And I was in the van and thinking to myself, I could get out right now and be implicated, or go along with it. And I went along with it. And it was only a few minutes later, when he circled the store 3 times, that the police pulled us over, and we were all hauled out onto the pavement in front of a McDonald's that I frequented near my school, and in front of all of my peers. I had a policeman standing on my face, cuffing me on the street. And I sat in a holding cell for 22 hours before I saw the justice of the peace. I didn't sleep a wink. I stared at that light flickering, buzzing above me, thinking to myself, this is not what I want out of life. And I remembered Philippians 1:6. God is not done with me yet. And that was a massive turning point for me in my life. It was definitely a dark moment. Certainly people have had darker, but it was the pivotal point for me to be able to say, I need to do something different, radically different. And I accepted Christ into my life. And I don't want to be preachy. I'm telling you my story as it is real and tangible to me, that there might be a line of hope offered out to you today, even in your situation, or in the people that you're serving here today, that need that sort of hope offered out to them. And I thank you for what you do. You do it in practical ways, you do it in spiritual ways, you do it in ways that some of these folks will never tangibly understand, but you are communicating the gospel in all the things that you do. And I'm so appreciative to be a part of that. I think one of the things that I'll leave you with today is as Shirley mentioned, I'm married to an incredible human being who you guys get to work with, and she'll be back July 2nd, which I've already prefaced she's so excited about. But I have 2 boys that are growing up, that are looking around in this world, and they're going to wonder, what is out there for me in this world? And my job, if I'm going to be honest, is not to keep them out of trouble, but to give them every opportunity to understand what's available to them, that there is hope always offered out in front of them, even when it is bleak and things are not good. And it's our great privilege that we get to send them out like arrows into the world, that they'll hit their mark and do incredible things. It's just sharing our youngest, who Kaylee is now on mat leave with, Ezekiel, we call him Zeke, Easy G. Actually, all of our kids have built-in hashtags. There's hashtag BroGo, hashtag Easy G, and they're the hashtag GoBros, being Go Ringer. We just kind of threw all those in there. So, but Ezekiel is so determinate. He is one of the most determined kids I've ever seen. It sometimes means we get no sleep because he wants us to put him back down every time, and we'll scream until we do so. But our other son, Brody, is so full of life and passion and gusto. And these kids, I have no doubt in my mind, are going to reshape history as a result. And the lives that we get to touch both in our own families as a result of this transformative power that God has when we accept his offer of hope and love and eternal life, whether it's our own families or the work that we do. Whether I work at Parks Foundation, please buy me a latte. I'd love to give you a tour. Or the work that you are all doing is so important because it demonstrates this in such a powerful and tangible way. Do you mind if I think you? Okay, I'm going to pray. In Young Life, one of the things working with teenagers over the years, we always said this: we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take God seriously. It's great to laugh together. It's great to play together, but it's also good to really take the time to take seriously these bigger questions in life. And so I want you to invite you to be able to come on that journey with me for a moment as I pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this group. I thank you for the impact that they're making not only in this city, but across the country, really. My sister is living in Nanaimo, British Columbia, and has been so wonderfully impacted by the lives and care that has been given because of this group at the Mustard Seed over the years. And there are countless stories throughout this entire country and even this globe that can say the very same thing. So I thank you for every single one of them. I invite them to bring a coffee over to me over at Parks Foundation and to be able to continue this conversation. And if there is an opportunity or someone here that is really thinking, I need that hope. Lord, I pray that you would come in like a flood and be that hope to them today. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Brian. I've heard Brian's story in bits and pieces, but not ever in his telling. And it is one that we will take with us for sure. Thank you for being so vulnerable with us. So next week, we will hear from Dean's friend, Corey, who is Associate Pastor at Central Baptist in Edmonton. So until then, God bless you and see you next week. Bye.
Thanks so much.